So at the Microsoft Fabric conference, there was a feature that was announced but hasn't been released. That is probably going to change the way that you write DAX and interact with Power BI. Now, I was waiting to see if this feature would be released, and it looks like it's going to be a little while. So I wanted to hop on and talk about it today. What is it? Well, it's not user data functions, which is what I talked about last time, but user defined functions in DAX. Now, DAX is what's called a functional language. Some might even label it a strictly functional language. And what this essentially means is that you give it an input and it returns an output, right? It's a simple algorithm. That's what DAX is. And that's not always the most easy for us to follow or to learn as humans. Now, previously in DAX, you could reuse measures. You could take a measure from someone online and you could put it in your semantic model, right? And you could go ahead and you could change a variable at the top in that measure. But if you went and you wrote another measure in DAX, you could only reference the output of that first measure. You couldn't give that first measure a new input, which means it's always going to output basically the same thing no matter what. What user-defined functions allow for you to do in DAX is they allow for you to give an input and get a different result. So here we have SQL BI's article on the topic where they talk about it pretty briefly, and I'll link this down in the video description. But here you can kind of see the format where you define a function, you define an input, and then you define a output and it applies that logic to your inputs. Now, the ones that they have talking about are date conversions and then also giving inputs into SVG visuals. So you could essentially kind of flip or change the SVG visual depending on the input. And I think these are good examples. But one of the true advantages of functions is their reusability. And so, what I'm really excited to see is the kind of creativity that comes from people that build Power BI reports and start to be able to reuse some of their code without having to understand the context of their semantic model, right? If you think about a language like Python, there's a whole library of open source modules that allow you to do all kinds of different things. You know, if I want a Python module that goes and submits an API request to pull down my stock portfolio from Fidelity, there's a Python module for that, right? Now, I don't think right off the bat we'll see that kind of wild functionality coming to DAX, but the introduction of the ability to create functions like this is kind of the first step towards that. So, with that said, let me know down in the video comments if you have any good ideas for a DAX function. And if you enjoy content like this, which lately they've just been kind of news and my ramblings, but also, I do a lot of tutorials on Power BI, SQL, and Python. Please consider giving me a follow and liking this video. Thanks for watching.